Hi, everyone, and welcome back for another episode of Malice in the Mitten. I am your host, Tracy Preston, along with my bestie, Christine Mulligan. Hey, Christine.
Hey, Trace. How's it going? What's going on? What are we hearing about today?
Well, I'm just curious about something real quick, just a super quick question. What year was your dad born?
1948. Why?
Well, mine was born in 1944, which was 1 year before the end of World War II. In the Vietnam War, get this, I totally forgot about this. The Vietnam War started on November 1st, 1955, and ended April 30th, 1975. I gotta be honest, I do not remember that war lasted for 20 years.
I know, it's crazy.
It was horrible.
It's crazy that it went on forever, and there was, I don't know. And not any ground that I'm really fully aware of was won. Nothing was won, I don't think.
I agree with you. Long before I was born, my dad was in the Navy, and I never even knew it until the day of his funeral that my dad was in Vietnam. Was your dad?
Yeah, he was a radio man, but it was towards the end.
Okay. I don't really know what my dad did. I just learned it, and I was like, wow, because he never even spoke of it. And I get it. I'm pretty sure I understand why. I couldn't even imagine at that time having a son and have them being drafted into the war. But being drafted was a thing in our past on more than one occasion. Now, speaking of war, I've got an incredible soldier to tell you about today and his time in World War II. So what do you say we get into it?
So let's get into it. There's no kids, so war I guess I can do, but we'll see.
Okay. Well, this is Season 9, Episode 10, Jumpin Joe Beyrle, the paratrooper who fought for 2 flags. In 1944, an American paratrooper, Joseph R. Beyrle, made his third jump into Nazi-occupied France, but his mission went sideways. Captured by the Germans, beaten by the Gestapo, and imprisoned behind enemy lines, Beyrle refused to die quietly. He escaped not once, but twice. And when he finally crossed into Soviet territory, he did something no other American ever had. He joined the Red Army to keep fighting the same war under a different flag. On today's episode, we will dive deep into his journey from the fields of Normandy to the ruins of Berlin, and from missing presumed dead to national hero. Remember, today as a bridge between 2 superpowers, once divided by war. Imagine jumping out of a plane at night. You're 20 years old. The wind screams past your helmet. The ground below is enemy territory, and history's largest invasion has just begun. Now imagine doing that twice, escaping capture twice, and then fighting for an army that was supposed to be your ally, but also your nation's future rival. Today, the true story of Joseph Jumpin Joe Beyrle, the only American soldier known to have fought for both the United States and the Soviet Union during World War II. Joseph Beyrle was born in 1923 in Muskegon, Michigan, a small industrial town on Lake Michigan's shoreline. He was one of 7 children in a working-class Catholic family. His parents, William and Elizabeth, lived through the Great Depression, and by the time Joe was a teenager, he already carried the kind of grit you only get from hard times. Beyrle grew up fixing things, building things. He had steady hands and a fearless streak. That made him perfect for the paratroopers, where steadiness meant survival. After high school, he earned a scholarship to Notre Dame, but the headlines in Europe were already pulling his attention overseas. Hitler had invaded Poland, France had fallen, and Britain stood alone. So in 1942, Joseph Beyrle enlisted in the United States Army Paratroopers, specifically the brand new 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, part of what would become the legendary 101st Airborne Division. This was the same regiment that inspired Band of Brothers. But before they were heroes, they were just a bunch of kids learning to jump out of planes at Camp Tacoka, Georgia. The motto at Tacoka was Kurahi, meaning we stand alone. Beyrle lived that spirit. He was strong, quick, and a bit reckless, and that got him noticed. By late 1943, Joe Beyrle had become a demolition specialist, an expert in setting timed charges, cutting power lines, and blowing up bridges. He wasn't just another paratrooper. He was part of a secret group trained for covert sabotage missions in occupied France. That's right. Months before D-Day, he was already jumping into France, carrying gold coins for the French resistance, delivering radios, testing drop zones for the invasion that was still being planned. Those months were short and brutal. You jump in, find your contacts, drop your package, and get out. Every second spent on the ground increased your chance of capture, but Joe kept volunteering. He loved the adrenaline, the secrecy, the idea that a single man behind enemy lines could make a difference. By June 1944, he made 2 successful drops. His third would come on the eve of D-Day, Operation Overlord, June 6, 1944. Hundreds of C-47 Dakota aircraft fill the night sky over Normandy. Inside one of them, Joseph Beyrle, weighed down by 70 pounds of gear, clutching his parachute harness. I looked out and saw the tracer fire. Red lines coming up through the clouds. You just jump. You don't think. You jump. Beyrle's group drops into chaos. Anti-aircraft fire tears through the formation. Paratroopers are scattered miles from their target zones. Joe lands in a hedgerow, alone, behind enemy lines, deep inside occupied France. He buries his parachute, checks his compass, and begins to move east toward the nearest resistance cell. He made contact within hours. That's how good he was. No radio, no backup, just instinct. He'd trained for this exact moment. For 3 days, Beyrle blew up German communication lines, planted charges on railway tracks, and guided other scattered paratroopers to safety. But then, everything changed. Near Sainte-Mère-Église, he was ambushed by a German patrol, shot at, beaten, captured. They tied my hands, took my boots. I thought they'd shoot me right there. He'd just become one of thousands of Allied POWs, which is prisoners of war, but few would endure what came next. He was stripped of identification, beaten again, and sent to a holding facility for interrogation. But this wasn't an ordinary POW camp. This was Stalag 3C, east of Berlin, run by the Wehrmacht, notorious for its brutality. Conditions there were hellish. Little food, disease everywhere. Prisoners slept on straw, fought rats for bread, and the guards took pleasure in cruelty. Yet even here, Joseph Beyrle began planning his escape because surrender, that wasn't in his DNA, and destiny wasn't finished with him yet. The gates of Stalag 3C clanged shut behind Joseph Beyrle in late June 1944. His dog tags were gone. The Germans had labeled him prisoner 126G. He was supposed to be one more number, another man forgotten in a war that was devouring millions. But Joe Beyrle wasn't built for captivity. Inside that camp, he became a different kind of soldier, one who fought with patience, not bullets. He started trading cigarettes for wire, bread for nails, nails for bits of cloth, anything that could be turned into an escape tool. He memorized guard routines, mapped out the towers, even counted the seconds between floodlight sweeps. Every detail was part of his plan. Hey, Joe says the fence current drops for 60 seconds after lights out. 60 seconds. That's our window. In September 1944, he and 2 British POWs made their move. They cut the fence, crawled through the mud, and disappeared into the woods. They didn't make it far. By dawn, German patrols with dogs found them hiding in a barn. They dragged us back by the collars. The dogs did the rest. We were lucky they didn't shoot us. This time, the Gestapo took him, not the Army guards, and that meant real danger. Now, for those that do not know, Gestapo is short for Geheime Staatspolizei, meaning secret state police, which was a Nazi Germany political police force founded in 1933, shortly after Adolf Hitler came to power. Their purpose was to identify, arrest, and eliminate anyone considered an enemy of the Nazi regime, including political opponents, Jews, resistance members, clergy, intellectuals, and others. They enforced political conformity and contributed directly to the persecution and murder of millions during World War II. The Gestapo accused him of being a spy. No uniform, no papers. Under German law, that meant execution. He was sent to Berlin for interrogation, beaten, starved, chained to a pipe in a basement. Still, he refused to give up the code names of his unit. All I said was my name, and that I was a soldier, nothing else. What saved him? A small miracle and a paperwork error. A Luftwaffe officer realized he was listed as a missing paratrooper from Normandy. That meant he was a legal POW after all. Back to the camps he went, but the Gestapo had broken something deeper, the illusion of safety. If he stayed, he'd die, and he knew it. So Joe began planning again. He was moved north by train to another camp in Poland. On that train, he made his second escape attempt. During a nighttime air raid, bombs fell near the rail line. The prisoners on the train panicked, but not Beyrle. He slipped through a shattered window and into the smoke. 4 days he traveled east on foot, sleeping in barns, scavenging food, avoiding roads. Winter was coming early that year, and he could hear the front moving closer. Artillery thundered somewhere in the distance. He wasn't running anymore. He was walking toward something. The Soviet lines. By January 1945, the Red Army was pushing west. If Beyrle could reach them, he might survive. But no American had ever done that before. He followed the sounds of the tanks. 3 days later, he stumbled onto a column of Soviet armor cutting across the Polish countryside. "Who are you? German?" "American. Paratrooper, look! U.S. Army." The Soviets didn't believe him. He was beaten again, searched for weapons, nearly shot. Only when they found his dog tag hidden in his boot heel did they stop. And even then, they brought him to their commander. That commander was Captain Alexandra Samusinka, one of the only female tank officers in the Soviet Army. And at this moment, 2 exhausted soldiers meeting in the snow would change everything. Joseph Beyrle had survived 2 POW camps, 2 escapes, and the Gestapo. Now, he faced a new battlefield, not as a prisoner, but as a soldier alongside the Red Army. The Soviets were cautious. An American in German territory? Well, that could be a spy. But Beyrle showed them his dog tags, his United States uniform hidden under layers of stolen clothing, and, most importantly, his willingness to fight. You want to fight? You fight, but follow orders. And so, Joseph Beyrle became an unlikely tank gunner in a T-34 battalion, part of the 1st Guards Tank Army. He called it simply one of the wildest times of my life. It was extraordinary. Here was an American fighting under Soviet command, shooting at the same enemy he had faced in Normandy. 2 flags, 1 purpose. The first weeks were chaotic. Beyrle didn't speak Russian well. He didn't know Soviet tactics. And he was surrounded by men who had been fighting since 1941. I didn't know the words, but I knew the mission. Shoot, move, survive. That's all a soldier needs. In February 1945, the unit crossed into East Prussia, encountering stiff German resistance. Beyrle manned the machine gun in the turret, firing at retreating soldiers, covering infantry advances, and learning Soviet military discipline the hard way. Accounts describe him as fearless. He'd throw himself into combat, sometimes disregarding his own safety, and that reputation spread quickly. Then came a fateful day. A German Stuka dive bomber attacked the unit. Beyrle was hit in the shoulder and knocked unconscious. I woke up in a hospital. Russians everywhere. I thought, maybe this is the end. But the Soviets nursed him back to health. For the first time in months, he was safe. Yet, even in a hospital bed, the world didn't know Joseph Beyrle had survived. The United States Army had declared him dead. His family back in Michigan had received a letter of condolence, and here he was, alive. After recovering, Beyrle returned to combat with the Red Army. He participated in final offenses toward Berlin, witnessing the collapse of the Third Reich firsthand. And when the war ended, he did something even more remarkable. He returned home. Think about that. This man had parachuted into France, been captured, escaped, fought with a foreign enemy, and survived to tell the tale. Now, few in history have lived through so much in such a short span of time.
I just can't help myself. I'm listening to you with bated breath because I keep thinking to myself, Trace, we talk about malice in Michigan, And you're telling me about this war hero escaping all of these times and all of the things that he's done. And this is like, I'm feeling like it's epic. And I'm hearing all of this, like you're telling me all of this without, everything that you add for the people that listen to us. So it's super interesting, but I can't help but think, okay, so does this guy go home to Michigan and kill people? Because I don't know how I'm going to feel about this now. I don't know how I'm going to feel, Trace. I'm already contemplating how am I going to feel when you start telling me that this guy, after everything that he's been through and all that he's done, he's going to come home and be mental.
Right. I mean, you'd think that's what would happen because I didn't add it in, but I'm going to say it now. When the Gestapo beat him, they basically bashed his head in. So you would think with all the trauma.
A number of problems. Yeah.
That's right. Yeah.
A number of problems.
Yeah. But I'm not going to tell you that. I know. All right. Okay, here we go. So Beyrle's journey with the Red Army left a mark on both sides. He received medals from the Soviets and decades later, recognition from the United States. His story would become a symbol of cooperation between enemies for the sake of humanity. It's almost unimaginable. He was in American and Soviet tanks using their guns, speaking broken Russian, but fighting the same enemy he had in France. A living paradox. April 1945, Joseph Beyrle was finally back on European soil, controlled by the Allies. But there was a problem. According to the United States military records, he was already dead. Imagine coming home, stepping off a train, and realizing your own family had mourned you and even received a Purple Heart in your name. When I got off the train, my mother fainted. She thought I was a ghost. Beyrle's official death complicated everything. He had to prove his identity, navigate bureaucracy, and convince the Army he was, in fact, alive. Even in peacetime, proving survival can be nearly impossible. Joe had been declared missing, captured, and presumed dead. It took weeks of verification before he was officially recognized. Back in Muskegon, Michigan, friends and neighbors couldn't believe it either. He was thinner, scarred, and haunted, but alive. And yet, despite all he had endured, Beyrle's story was not widely known. He married his high school sweetheart, Joanne Hollowell, and started a family. 3 children, a quiet life, a factory job. Normalcy after decades of chaos. I didn't talk about the war much. I left that for letters and the few who asked. It was easier that way. Yet the world eventually caught up with Beyrle's extraordinary tale. In 1945, he returned from Soviet hospitals and the frontline units. He had medals from both the United States Army and the Soviet Red Army, a distinction no other soldier could claim. Think about it. An American soldier honored by 2 superpowers during one of history's most brutal wars. That's a legacy few can touch. In interviews later in life, Beyrle spoke not of medals, but of loyalty and purpose. I didn't switch sides. I just wanted to fight the people who were killing everyone I could help. It didn't matter whose uniform they wore. Tyranny had to end. His story challenges the way we see war, heroism, and nationality. It reminds us that courage can transcend borders and that one man's determination can survive bureaucracy, bullets, and history itself. Yet, there were questions. How many soldiers fought silently without recognition? How many families never knew their loved ones survived against all odds? Beyrle's story is a bridge between worlds. It's a lesson that history is not only about dates and battles, it's about people who make impossible choices. After the war, Joseph Beyrle quietly resumed life in Michigan. Yet the story of the American who fought with Soviet tanks could not stay hidden forever. By the 1970s and 80s, historians and journalists began uncovering his incredible story. He had survived capture, 2 escapes, and frontline combat with 2 armies. And the medals, once buried in bureaucratic paperwork, began to catch up with him. Beyrle became a living symbol of courage and resilience, not just for Americans, but for Russians who remembered him fighting alongside their soldiers. In 1994, on the 50th anniversary of D-Day, Beyrle returned to Normandy as a guest of honor. He stood where he had parachuted 50 years before. He met Russian President Boris Yeltsin and United States President Bill Clinton. For the first time, the world saw the full magnitude of his achievements. I did what I had to do. The medals are nice, but it's the people I fought beside I remember most. Russia awarded him medals and held ceremonies in his honor. The United States officially recognized him as a hero of 2 armies. His story became an international bridge, proof that humanity could transcend borders, even after war. Beyrle's life reminds us that courage isn't limited to nationality. Loyalty to a cause rather than a uniform can define true heroism. Yet beyond medals and ceremonies, Beyrle left lessons. Bravery can survive imprisonment and despair. One person can make a difference even in a global conflict. Friendship and loyalty can cross nations, languages, and ideologies. His story challenges us to see war differently, not only as a battle of nations, but as a human experience defined by courage, survival, and moral choices. Beyrle survived where most would have perished. He defied death multiple times, and yet he returned home quietly, not seeking fame, only recognition that sometimes came decades later. Joe's story reminds us that courage isn't always about medals. Sometimes it's about persistence, determination, and a refusal to surrender to circumstance. Joe once said in a rare interview, "I didn't fight for glory. I fought for survival. I fought for freedom. And I fought for the people I could help along the way." He fought for 2 flags, but he remained loyal to one principle: defeat tyranny, protect the innocent. He refused to see soldiers simply as enemies. They were humans, trapped in a war machine. His life teaches us 3 lessons. 1, courage transcends borders. A soldier's valor is measured by his actions, not the color of his uniform. 2, persistence in the face of impossible odds can change the course of a life or even history. And 3, humanity matters in war. Beyrle helped soldiers, civilians, and even former enemies whenever possible. Today, the story of Jumpin Joe is remembered not only in books and documentaries, but in the symbolism of his burial with 2 flags at Arlington. A man who embodied cooperation, bravery, and endurance beyond measure. Joseph Beyrle passed away in 2004 at the age of 81. Yet his story endures, teaching us about courage, loyalty, and the power of one individual in the vast machinery of history. Now, I want to leave you with a few questions to think about. What does Joseph Beyrle's journey teach us about loyalty and identity in wartime? Could an act like his be possible today in a world defined by alliances and bureaucracy? How should history remember a soldier who transcended borders for a shared cause? I was just blown away by this man's story. He just lived a quiet life. He didn't do anything bad here. He didn't lose his mind. The head trauma didn't affect him. He was unlike any heroic story I've ever heard.
Okay, so he didn't come home and cause malice in Michigan. So we're telling this story because this was kind of a malicious thing that happened to a Michigander?
Yeah.
But it worked out all good.
It worked out all good.
You just wanted to flip the script on me because this whole time I'm waiting for the malice in Michigan, not realizing that you're already telling me about malice that happened to a Michigander.
That's right. I flippy the scrippy.
All right, you flipped the script on me. Okay.
Yeah.
I'm not even sure how I feel about this. It's going to take me a minute. It was a lovely story. I loved hearing it.
He was brutally beaten numerous occasions and kept fighting and survived. So I guess it's really, about the horrible things that this Michigander went through and his incredible fight for survival and to keep fighting against tyranny. He came home a war hero.
I get it. I feel ya. It's the victorious Michigander. That's what we're getting from this.
That's right.
I love it.
A man who should be remembered. I never heard of this guy before, so I'm certain there's plenty who haven't. So history is something that we need to remember. So thank you for joining us on this journey. And if you were inspired by Joseph Beyrle's life, share this story. Because true heroism isn't just remembered, it's passed on. Stay curious, stay courageous, and remember the extraordinary in the ordinary. So thank you all for joining us. As always, we appreciate you. And we will see you back on Wednesday for Round Robin. Have a great week, everyone.
Bye.
Bye.